Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Nandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Pad Paramahansa Rudikacharya Ashtoto Tadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Rudikacharya Ashtoto Tadashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the Assam devotees. All glories to the Assam devotees. All glories to the Assam devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 On this first day of April 2020 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we're still in chapter 12 entitled Devotional Service, texts 13 and 14, page 522 in many books. I guess I'll chant it myself. Adveshta sarvabhutanam maitra karuna evacha nirmamo nadahankara samadus kasukakshami santushtak satatam yogi yatatma dhunanishtayaha maya pitamano buddhir yomad bhakta same priyaha. Translation. One who is not envious, but is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor and is free from false ego, who is equal in both happiness and distress, who is tolerant, always satisfied, self-controlled, and engaged in devotional service with determination, his mind and intelligence fixed on me. Such a devotee of mine is very dear to me. Purport. Coming again to the point of pure devotional service, the Lord is describing the transcendental qualifications of a pure devotee in these two verses. A pure devotee is never disturbed in any circumstances, nor is he envious of anyone, nor does a devotee become his enemy's enemy. He thinks, this person is acting as my enemy due to my own past misdeeds, so it is better to suffer than to protest. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.8, it is stated, Tatte nukampam susamikshamano bundana evatnukatam vipakam. Whenever a devotee is in distress or has fallen into difficulty, he thinks that it is the Lord's mercy upon him. He thinks, thanks to my past misdeeds, I should suffer far, far greater than I am suffering now. So it is by the mercy of the Supreme Lord that I am not getting all the punishment I am due. I am just getting a little by the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Close quote. Therefore, he is always calm, quiet, and patient, despite many distressful conditions. A devotee is also always kind to everyone, even to his enemy. Nirmama means that a devotee does not attach much importance to the pains and trouble pertaining to the body, because he knows perfectly well that he is not the material body. He does not identify with the body. Therefore, he is freed from the conception of false ego and is equipoised in happiness and distress. He is tolerant, and he is satisfied with whatever comes by the grace of the Supreme Lord. He does not endeavor much to achieve something with great difficulty. Therefore, he is always joyful. He is a completely perfect mystic because he is fixed in the instructions received from the spiritual master, and because his senses are controlled, he is determined. He is not swayed by false arguments because no one can lead him from the fixed determination of devotional service. He is fully conscious that Krishna is the eternal Lord, so no one can disturb him. All these qualifications enable him to fix his mind and intelligence entirely on the Supreme Lord. Such a standard of devotional service is undoubtedly very rare, but a devotee becomes situated in that stage by following the regulative principles of devotional service. Furthermore, the Lord says that such a devotee is very dear to him, for the Lord is always pleased with all his activities in full Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So this chapter, which is quite short, will end the way it began, and that is by Krishna enunciating the standard of pure devotional service. Arjuna asked his question, which are considered to be more perfect, those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested? And Krishna answered as explicitly as possible, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be most perfect. So this first pair of verses, there's, there's 7 verses here at the end, 8 verses, 13 through 20, which describe this state of pure devotion, and they're very valuable. They're quoted in their entirety in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this, he's come back around to this point of pure devotion. And through the verses here, he's mentioned the state of pure devotion, but he's also given a chance to those who are not yet ready to take up the serious process or the pure process of sadhana bhakti, and given them a chance also to make progress. In other words, he's giving a very wide net here in which people can come to Krishna consciousness. Even the impersonalists, he's saying eventually they can also come to me if they meet certain qualifications. But here he's now come back again to pure devotion, and he'll maintain that status or that same emphasis throughout the rest of the chapter. So the first quality is this non-envious, adveshta. Adveshta. You may remember that in the beginning of the, I think it's the 9th chapter, Imam tade guyatamam pravakshyam yanusuyave. I am speaking to you, Arjun, this most confidential knowledge because you have this qualification. Your main qualification is you're non-envious, anusuyave. And not envious of what? Well, not envious of other people, of other living entities, but also not envious of Krishna. And this word envious, I discovered early on in my devotional career, has a deeper meaning than we usually attach to it in America. Certainly it means you're not jealous of anybody else. You're not bearing envy that someone has something that you want. But I remember reading, I think it was Krishna book, one of Prabhupada's books, and said, the devotee is not envious even of an ant. And I was puzzled about that, and I said, well, what do we have to be envious of an ant for? What does an ant have that we want? But really what it means is that you will avoid harming an ant, but stepping on an ant. You will bear no malice. And if you look at this word up in the Oxford English Dictionary, which oftentimes gives us an insight to Srila Prabhupada's vocabulary, because he learned English, of course, at the beginning of the 20th century, and he studied English at Scottish Churches College, and so a lot of his English is English. And so it has this other meaning, which is to bear malice toward. And I think that's what's meant here, in addition to not being jealous of others, not bearing malice toward anyone, because it says sarvabhutanam, non-envious toward all living entities. In other words, kind, compassionate, considerate. Maitra karuna evacha. And on the positive side is that you're positively friendly and merciful to them. So it's more than just a negative quality, not bearing malice, not being jealous or envious, but positively trying to help them. This is an important aspect of pure devotion, is that the devotee can't just sit alone and practice devotional service. He wants to give it to others because he knows the urgency. That famous phrase, paradukkha dukhi, which is actually describing Raghunath Das Goswami, he feels the pain of others, and therefore he tries to help them by giving them Krishna consciousness. So this is all very pleasing to Krishna. Nirmamo narahankara. Now Prabhupada said nirmamo means that a devotee does not attach much importance to the pains and trouble pertaining to the body. So that's an interesting expansion of the meaning given in the purports here in the word-for-word meanings and the translation. And free from false ego, let's see. He does not think himself a proprietor. Nirmamo is often said to mean, the purport is given as not mine. Nothing is mine. This quality of a kinchana. He understands that Krishna owns everything. Everything is his energy, and whatever we have that we use is just given to us by Krishna. And how we use it makes all the difference in what our consciousness becomes. But when we try to claim proprietorship over part of Krishna's energy, this is when we get into trouble. And indeed, Prabhupada says in the commentary, the purport to the first mantra of the Ishopanishad. You may recall this one, Ishabhasham idam sarvam yatkinchit jagatam jagat tena chaktena bhundridha magota kasya swidhanam. That everything is owned and controlled by the Ishwar, by the Lord, by Krishna. Ishabhasham idam sarvam yatkinchit jagatam. Whatever there is in the universe, we're entitled to our quota for maintenance and for living comfortably in this world, but not more. If we have more, then basically we become thieves. And in the purport there at the end, Prabhupada says this is the basic principle of all of the strife and quarrels within the world, is that people get together and on the basis of their shared language and where they take birth, they claim a certain part of the land, and then they go to battle with others nearby, and it works on a level between nation and nation, and between individuals as well. So nirmama, just living with the minimal. We saw the ideal of that. We're on page 522. The ideal of that with the Goswamis. Raghunath Das developed it to the ultimate degree, this renunciation principle. And I remember, what's that song? When you have nothing to lose. You remember that? And so that's great, provided that you can tap in to the reservoir of pleasure in your heart, which is Krishna, and you can be completely satisfied with minimal. Nirahankara. So ahankar is this false sense of self, false ego, and that false ego is categorized by aham mameti. I am this body, and the things in relation to it are mine. So it directly relates to the previous word, nirmama nirahankara. So if you're not in the false ego, then you need to be in the true ego. Huh? Haribola. Okay, thanks for picking in. Hare Krishna, hope you're well. Nirmamo hankara. So, thinking nothing is mine, and I'm not this body. The body is simply a vehicle for serving Krishna, and I'm a spirit soul and an eternal servant of Krishna. This is what nirahankara, nirmamo means. Samadukkha sukhakshami. And in that, when you have these qualifications, then you can be tolerant. You can regard misery and happiness together as equal. Chami means tolerance, isn't it? Forgiving. Forgiving actually is a tolerance of slights by others and insults. It's a type of tolerance, but it specifically refers to tolerating insults and tolerating, that type of thing. Not so much physical pain. And being, you may recall, back in the second chapter, this idea was introduced of being equipoised in happiness and distress. Dukkha, when Krishna starts describing one whose intelligence is fixed in devotion, Arjuna wants to know what are his qualities, how does he walk, how does he talk, how does he sit. And the first thing Krishna says is, Dukkeshvanodvignamana, Sukkeshu vigataspaha, Vita raga bhaya krodha stita dhir manuruchite. No, that's not the first thing he said, but that's one of the verses, a couple of verses in. So, udvigna, this udvigna word comes up again and again. When Prahlad Maharaj is speaking to his father, the first thing he says, when he suddenly reveals himself to be a devotee, the pastime, right? Where his father, he's come back from school, puts him on his lap. I think it's there, maybe he's smelling his head, he still has all this affection. And then he asks him, well, what's the best thing you learned? And he uses it, Tatsaramunye asodavarya dehinam sada samudvigna diyam asadgrahat. So, as they often do, very concisely describes the material condition of the living entity. So the best thing I learned, Father, he doesn't call him Father, he calls him the best of the demons. Tat saru in this context means good, or, the best. Asodavaya dehinam, best for whom, Prabhupada says on the tape, best for the living entity, the embodied living entity, who is always sada some udvigna diyam, whose consciousness or intelligence is always disturbed. Not just udvigna, but some udvigna means completely, like sankirtan. Asadgrahat, because we're holding on for dear life to the temporary body, the temporary money, the situation. And as we can see in our present condition, at any time it can be overturned. And all of our plans and all of our sense of security is overturned. So, one who can be udvigna, dukesh anudvigna. Anudvigna means not disturbed, even in the misery. Dukesh anudvigna mana. The mind remains equipoised. And sukeshu vigataspaha. In the environment where there's a temptation to enjoy happiness, vigataspaha. You give up, you don't engage. In other words, in both poles, you're able to remain fixed. This is the quality of a real devotee. And you get that way by being completely absorbed in serving Krishna's lotus feet. And with those qualities, santushta satatam yogi. So always satisfied. Now how can you be always satisfied? You have to be remembering Krishna at every moment. That's where the satisfaction comes from. That's why just chanting Hare Krishna, if you really get absorbed, and kirtan, it's easier to get absorbed, with many devotees, then you can be satisfied and we sit there for hours, maybe get up and stretch your body a little bit, but you're not thinking, I got something else to do, you actually can be satisfied even without being on the highest plane of pure devotion. But you can imagine what that would be like. It's just pure nectar. You're enjoying the spiritual happiness that comes from connecting with Krishna in a very intense way. Most of the time there's a lot of static. But that's how you can be santushta, completely satisfied in any condition. Satatam, always. Yogi, always connected. Yat atma, self-controlled. Drida nishchaya, very determined. And of course, the foundation of all of this, maya arpita mano buddhir, the mind and body dedicated to me. So he's described the condition of some of the conditions of the pure devotee here. And that such a devotee is very dear to Krishna. He says dear, and then at the end he says very dear. So, let's see, there's more in this purport. All these purports are very rich. Now, he quotes this important verse from the 14th chapter, 10th canto. This verse is spoken by Brahma, and he gives the kind of the definition, or the prescription. At the end of the verse, it says, you become dayabak, which means you become like someone who will inherit property. If you can have this consciousness described in this verse, then Prabhupada describes this like almost buying a ticket to the local Vrindavan. So we'll go through the rest of the verse because he gives us half of it here. Tatte anukampam susamikshamano bunjana evatmakritam vipakam. This is in the middle of the purport there, the 13-14, page 523, in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:14-8. You see? So Prabhupada kind of gives how you can avoid becoming angry at someone who shows enmity toward you. This is very difficult, but here's the attitude. He's acting as my enemy due to my own past misdeeds. So it is better to suffer than to protest. Prabhupada, there's a pastime, Bhagavad Rama would love to tell this one, where Prabhupada met all kinds of people when he would travel. The devotees would arrange for different professors and everybody to meet Prabhupada wherever he went. So this is, I think, in Philadelphia. And Rabindra Swarup was always in the universities heading toward getting a PhD, so he met a lot of professors. And one of them was an Indian professor, and he invited him to meet Prabhupada. And so as soon as they started discussing, it became clear that he was a Mayavadi, And he got into this big argument with Prabhupada. And eventually they had to, say, well, it's time to leave. I think Brahmananda, big Brahmananda, you see it pretty good. So he had to leave, And the devotees were just mortified what happened. And so Prabhupada says, so yeah, I may be mixing up two stories. But one of the devotees said, boy, what's going to happen to him? He's going to burn in hell for 1,000,000 years. And so Prabhupada said, well, maybe we can just forgive him. And I may be mixing something up, but there's one thing like this where he said, I must have insulted him in my past life. It's exactly like this. So I'm getting some back, so he's illustrating this point that he's making here. But the verse says, Tate anukampam. Anukampam is Krishna's mercy, He uses this very word in the 10th chapter, in those 4 verses, essential verses. Susamikshimano. So means always looking for the mercy of Krishna. Or it can mean always seeing everything as the mercy of Krishna, even the difficulties that come upon me. Bunjana often means to enjoy, but it doesn't mean to enjoy here. It means to experience, and mostly to experience suffering. Experiencing the vipaka, the suffering, that's due to atmakritam. I did it myself. Atmakritam means it's something that I've done in my past. And you can see how that can knock out the legs of any kind of building resentment that you feel, You realize, well, yeah, this must be a result of something I did. So why should I be angry at this person? And and the other part of it is that you see that this is mercy of Krishna, and that he's minimizing it. It could have been much worse. Rarely anything happens to you that you think it's the absolute worst that could happen. I mean, it can be pretty bad, but it could be much worse. So Krishna is minimizing it. He's so kind. And on the flip side, when good things happen, because things like happen else, or due to your previous activities, Krishna is so kind, he's giving me more facility to serve him. Now, if you examine that, it's almost like it sounds like a mental trick, but actually a devotee can really feel like that. Then in both cases, and when you think about it, when your life is made up of pleasant experiences, bad experiences, neutral experiences, you always remain favorable to Krishna. It's never that, whereas someone who is just superficially religious is looking to God as an order supplier, That's the Kaitava Dharma. When good things happen, it says, wow, just look at what I did. That's why I'm successful. And when bad things happen, why? Why did God do this to me? Not that I did something, And so your faith is very shaky. And just like the German ladies whose husbands, sons, and brothers never came back from the war. They lost their faith. They became atheistic because they were so religious. They were praying so intensely, but they didn't come back. So the rest of this verse goes, the proof that you have this mentality and seeing everything as Krishna's mercy is that from the heart, rid, your word, bhag, babhub, and your body, your conscience and everything, vidadhan namaste, you continue serving him and offering obeisances in spite of all of these things. Then, yo jivati mukti pade sadaya bhak. One who lives this way becomes sure to attain mukti pade. Mukti pade means the lotus feet, mukti, or the situation of mukti. So, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, who had been in Mayavadi and was converted, he chanted this verse to Lord Chaitanya, but he changed the last line. He was a rascal editor. He changed the last, instead of Mukti Pade, he said Bhakti Pade. So Lord Chaitanya laughed. He said, you can't change the Bhagavatam. It is what it is. So he described that Mukti Pade is Krishna's lotus feet, which is the place of liberation. In other words, it's still, of course, personalist. So that's the idea, is that Daya Bhak, that phrase is kind of an ISKCON idiom that means you're like someone who's ready to inherit property, and you're sure to get it. So you can see how valuable getting that attitude is. And because of one is tolerant like that, and of course the perfect example is Prahlad Maharaj, through all the tribulation that he went through, he kept his devotion, he didn't lose faith, he kept being absorbed in Krishna, and he came through with flying colors. Therefore he's always calm, quiet, patient, despite many distressful conditions. That describes Prahlad to a T. And many other devotees like Haridas Thakur. Doesn't identify with the body, he's tolerant, satisfied. He's a perfect mystic. Very well. Okay, so that's the first two verses of this description here. And I forgot to give the number, 858-291-9815, with text if you have any questions. Hare Krishna. Okay, moving on. Text 15. Yasmano ditate loko, lokano ditate chayaha, harshama shabayodvegar, muktoya sachame priyaha. He by whom no one is put into difficulty, and who is not disturbed by anyone, who is equipoised in happiness and distress, fear and anxiety, is very dear to me. Purport. A few of a devotee's qualifications are further being described. No one is put into difficulty, anxiety, fearfulness, or dissatisfaction by such a devotee. Such a devotee is kind to everyone, and he does not act in such a way as to put others into anxiety. At the same time, if others try to put a devotee into anxiety, he is not disturbed. It is by the grace of the Lord that he is so practiced that he is not disturbed by any outward disturbance. Actually, because a devotee is always engrossed in Krishna consciousness and engaged in devotional service, such material circumstances cannot move him. Generally, a materialistic person becomes very happy when there is something for his sense gratification and his body, but when he sees that others have something for their sense gratification and he hasn't, he is sorry and envious. When he is expecting some retaliation from an enemy, he is in a state of fear, and when he cannot successfully execute something, he becomes dejected. A devotee who is always transcendental to all these disturbances is very dear to Krishna. So, what makes all of this possible is the connection that the pure devotee has to Krishna, and that that rasamrita is flowing constantly in his heart, and therefore he's beyond it all. It's like he's not depending on anything material for his happiness, and therefore when material circumstances are difficult, that doesn't disturb him. If you're depending on all these material arrangements for your happiness, you're always going to be in distress. Even if you have them now, you're worried that you're going to lose them. you know. And then if you actually do lose him, you're in great anxiety, and you're looking for someone to blame, and you can go nuts that way. And that's what material life is a kind of madness. Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma. Certainly those who are simply focused on sense gratification, they're mad, and they perform all kinds of immoral and illegal activities, in most extreme cases. And they are sure they're suffering, because they're sure to get another body, and probably not a very favorable one. Whereas devotees, pure devotees, they're blissful themselves, and especially in Lord Chaitanya's movement, they want to give that to others. And the very act of giving it to others and experiencing with others increases their happiness. The Goswamis, this verse, Prabhupada would love to quote this verse. In fact, even in the in the 6 Goswamis verses, they're all really nice. But the one that really always sticks out for me is the number 4. Chaktva turna mashesha mandada patisheni sadat tuchavat. Bhutva dina ganeshako karunaya kopina kantashito. So this describes especially 3 of the 6 Goswamis, Rupa, Sanatana, and Raghunath. They both had tremendous facility for material enjoyment. Rupa and Sanatana were the left and right hand of the Nawab, the king of Bengal at the time. And, they felt they had been compromised. They were working for the Muslim king. But as far as material things go, Rupa had a whole boatload of gold. And Sanatana had so many things. So they had all the material things. But when Lord Chaitanya came to Ramkeli and they met him, they wanted to give it all up. And he told them, yes, go to Vrindavan and, excavate the places of pastimes, write the books, build temples if you can. And so their project then was just disentangling themselves. Rupa was able to cash out everything. They had a whole boatload of gold. Gave a quarter of it to his relatives. Half of it he gave to the Brahmins, Vaishnavas, a quarter of it to his relatives, probably because they expect something. And a quarter of it he kept for emergencies. And then that was used by Sanatan, who was arrested, because he was the king felt he was an essential part of his cabinet. And he was able to bribe his way out of prison. So from being at the top materially, they had political influence, they had everything that they could possibly want materially. They gave all of that up, and at great personal risks, made their way to Vrindavan, and I think they met Lord Chaitanya, right? And Rupa met him in Prayag, and Sanatana met him in Varanasi, and received direct instruction from him, and then they went on to Vrindavan. So then what did they do? They became as austere as possible. It describes it. Bhutva Dina Ganeshako. Dina Ganeshako means to become the leaders and helpers of the dinas, of the most wretched and people who need it. In other words, they were feeling their mission then was to spread the movement to their particular field of writing books and excavating Vrindavan, building temples like that. So Karunaya, out of their compassion, Kopina Kantashito, taking shelter of the most simple clothes, kopin and a little bhairavas, and really they showed by their life. They didn't have a fixed residence. They were living under different trees. They ate as simply as possible. Sometimes nothing, little chapati, whatever. Hardly slept at all. Bringing the material down to nil. So that's the first 2 lines. Then the 3rd line describes their state of mind. Gopi bhava rasamratabda lahari kalola magno mahur. Again and again, drowning and diving in the nectarian ocean of the Gopi bhava, love for Krishna, the highest levels of intensity. So they didn't feel they were the richest. They cashed in all of their material thing as tuchavat, as completely insignificant. And Raghunath Das, he was the 3rd, and he had tremendous opportunity. He was the only son and heir of very wealthy zamindars, Govardhan Majumdar and Haranya Majumdar, obviously, gold, name is gold. And the beautiful wife, like the goddess of fortune. But once he met Lord Chaitanya, they couldn't keep him down. He went to Puri and ratcheted up his renunciation right there as far as it could go, and he stayed with Lord Chaitanya for years and years. Although I understand he never actually exchanged words with him directly. You know, he would always speak through Damodar like that, Lord Chaitanya. But Lord Chaitanya gave him his Govardhan Shila that he had gotten when he visited Vrindavan, and the garland of Gunja, you know, which he treasured, and he worshipped that, and described that in his simple worship, he was under the tutelage of Damodar. He was experiencing the highest bliss just by worshipping that Govardhan Shila, you know. And then when Lord Chaitanya disappeared, he couldn't take it. He was going to commit suicide. But he went to Vrindavan, and he met the Goswamis, and they appealed to him, no, we need to hear these Antya Leela, and so he stayed, you know. 3 hours a day he would tell about those Leela on the bank of Radhakund. I'm sorry? It's not they didn't have direct contact. There was this idea of tremendous respect, you know, and he felt that he couldn't speak directly to him. And Lord Chaitanya, you know, because he gave him, you know, Srup Damodar, so he gave him all this mercy. But that was his way of showing his deference to Lord Chaitanya. So that's described here. His equipoise and happiness, says, fear and anxiety is very dear to me. Now this. You see how practical this is. You know, I mean, there are. Here we are in this situation where people are being overwhelmed with fear and anxiety. Why not? You know, you can see the advantage of a simple life. I mean, I'm looking at my own life. Okay, you know, I mean, it's a little changed. There's no guests and things like. But nothing much has changed. But if you're working out there, you got all these bills to pay, and the taxes, and my children, and all of the, that's where the anxiety is. You know, things are collapsing out there. But here we are, sitting simply, Hare Krishna, you know. And we can imagine what it would be like if we're really like floating along in our Nam Buddhivardhanam, you know, really advanced. You could realize the value of it. And this is how this movement has grown, because everyone, you know, if you're troubled and you're fortunate enough to be interested in this kind of thing, and you meet devotees who are not that different from you, but are in a different state of consciousness and have dealt with some of the same problems, and they're not in anxiety, they're not in distress, you know, because they're practicing Krishna consciousness, even in a neophyte state, that can be an attractive thing and bring you into the Sangha, and you can take up the process. So this kind of state, of course, this is the pure devotee, but even to show some of this, to have some of this, is very important in terms of preaching, because it gives people an example of a different kind of mentality, a different kind of attitude toward life that can be very attractive, especially if there's a lot of distress going on. Okay. All right. Any questions, comments on these? Okay, let's go on. These are all really important. We should try to imbibe these instructions and try to reach for these qualities. Because after all, the whole point is to become dear to Krishna, and every verse ends with that. Anapeksha shuchir daksha udasino gatavitaha sarvarambha padityagi Yor madbhakta same priyaha. My devotee who is not dependent on the ordinary course of activities, who is pure, expert, without cares, free from all pains, and not striving for some result, is very dear to me. Purport. Money may be offered to a devotee, but he should not struggle to acquire it. If automatically, by the grace of the Supreme, money comes to him, he is not agitated. Naturally, a devotee takes a bath at least twice in a day and rises early in the morning. That's the shuchi, pure, you see. And rises early in the morning for devotional service. Thus he is naturally clean both inwardly and outwardly. A devotee is always expert because he fully knows the essence of all activities of life, and he is convinced of the authoritative scriptures. A devotee never takes the part of a particular party, that's udasino. Therefore he is carefree. He's never pain, gata vyataha. His suffering is gone. Because he is free from all designations, he knows that his body is a designation, so if there is some bodily pains, he is free. The pure devotee does not endeavor for anything which is against the principles of devotional service. That's the sarvarambha parityagi. For example, constructing a big building requires great energy, and a devotee does not take to such business if it does not benefit him by advancing his devotional service. He may construct a temple for the Lord, and for that he may take all kinds of anxiety, but he does not construct a big house for his personal relations. So this sarvarambha parityagi is interesting, because what it means is he's a renouncer of all endeavors. Well, we're endeavoring. We have so many things we need to strive to do. Like right now, I got to endeavor to put out this book, this Vyasa Puja book. This is what happens at this time of year, so I'm taking all the offerings. They did already. They sent me an offering. Yeah. So that's a headache we don't have to worry about. So how is it that we're not engaging in any endeavors here? The idea is that on our own account, in other words, when you see what devotional service is, you can see that there are certain duties that have been given to you, certain projects, and they're not really, it's not your idea, that you're going to do this, but it's given to you from the higher authority. And if you surrender to it and you do it nicely and enthusiastically, that's selfless service. That's without any expectation of result. You're just doing it for the sake of the duty. And if you get a little more Krishna conscious, you can remember Krishna while you're doing it, remember your spiritual master, and you feel that you're serving and you're making a step forward. But when you think about it, all of the projects, or the long-range goals and the higher kind of things, that's also given from you. You could be part of that. Like, I was so happy when I was able to plug into book production, because I knew how dear book distribution and production was, publishing was to Prabhupada. And I never got over the hump in being a book distributor, but I felt I could do that service. And so that, I always felt fulfilled in doing that. Even just doing a little proofreading, whatever it was, to contribute. And all the press workers felt enlivened, It wasn't our idea, So that's sarvarambha parityagi. So that's what is meant here, that you don't undertake your, all kinds of projects in order for your own self-aggrandizement, but you're willing to accept all kinds of duties for the sake of Krishna. And that's what Bhagavad Gita is all about, is that Arjuna was dead set against fighting on his own, for his own reasons. All the relations he had, and just, he was paralyzed. He felt it was a tremendous anxiety. But when he accepted, this is Krishna's project, this is what he wants, and he could see, the reason for it, of course, is to reinstitute Dharma in the world and everything. And so he surrendered to it. So he's the example. So that's what this sarvarambha parityagi means, is that the pure devotee has no personal projects. His entire life is just trying to help Krishna in his projects, and his spiritual master and all the whole line, fulfilling their desires. And we see how, and it can be very difficult, overcome all the difficulties. But the real devotee doesn't become discouraged at setbacks. And I'm really looking forward to this book. It's coming out soon, huh? The book of Bombay, the Juhu, adventure. Because that's a great, inspiring example in when it was happening, and of course, but to really have the full story of it. Because that's the perfect ideal of what Prabhupada represented. Absolute determination to overcome all the difficulties. I mean, it's there and it's coming to America and so many things, the whole 12 years. He had to deal with devotees leaving from responsible positions, and all kinds of stuff. And he never gave up. That was the thing that Mr. Nair couldn't fathom. That's why he blew a gasket and died, Because all of his other victims had eventually said, "Oh, who cares? The hassle, keep the money," And probably wanted that land, Okay, give us back the money. No, I want the money. So I won't leave the land, And finally, it was just too much for him. Krishna took care of him. So that was Prabhupada's faith: is that with its firm determination, for Krishna's sake, eventually be successful, and that proved to be true in so many cases, and it's still true. So it's that's then such a devotee is very different. You can imagine, here's Krishna, and he's all supreme. He's got millions of servants, but here's someone who, out of love for him, is willing to undertake so much trouble for the sake of bringing others to Krishna, which is the thing that he really wants more than anything else. Then you can imagine how dear that person is. He says, you don't have to imagine. At the end, he says, "Nata tasma manusyeshu kaschame priyakritama." No one can be as dear to me as the preacher, those who are striving to spread my glories. So that's described here. All right, let's go on. These verses are all great. Let's see if we have any participants yet. No? I guess it's a dormant crowd out there tonight. Text 17. Yo narishyati na dreshti, na shochati na kankshati, shubhashabha parityagi, bhaktiman yatsame priyaha. Notice this word appears again in this from last year. Parityagi means complete renunciation, of sarvarambha, one's own endeavors, and here's shubhashabha, or the auspicious and inauspicious. One who neither rejoices nor grieves, who neither laments nor desires, and who renounces both auspicious and inauspicious things, such a devotee is very dear to me. Purport. A pure devotee is neither happy nor distressed over material gain and loss, nor is he very much anxious to get a son or disciple, nor is he distressed by not getting them. If he loses anything which is very dear to him, he does not lament. Similarly, if he does not get what he desires, he is not distressed. He is transcendental in the face of all kinds of auspicious, inauspicious, and sinful activities. He is prepared to accept all kinds of risks for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Nothing is an impediment in the discharge of his devotional service. Such a devotee is very dear to Krishna. So, this is, he's kind of saying the same thing in different kinds of words. Narishyati, nadveshti. Dveshti in the first verse had adveshta, non-envious, and here dveshti means not grieving. So, this is all growing out of constant contact with Krishna, loving contact by constant remembrance, and that. In that state, you can tolerate all kinds of things, and even up to the point of leaving your body. That's the whole point, is that even that doesn't disturb you, because you're just taking up your service. Just like Dhruva, the Dhruva Maharaj, how he stepped on the head of death and then got into his airplane. Very dramatic. So, the Shochati and the Kankshati, that's straight from the 18th chapter, the Brahma Bhuta Prasanama, the Shochati and the Kankshati. These two are characteristic of the consciousness in the modes of passion and ignorance. To lament, to always be lamenting. Lamenting is for the Sudras, And Kankshati, to long for something material, and to lament when it's gone or when you don't get it. This is what, material life is all about. But here it says, na Shochati and the Kankshati. What's to lament over? You've already decided nothing belongs to me. That's the first, nirmama, And what's there to long for? Of course, on the higher states, you want to long for Krishna's association. That's transcendental lamentation. But this is no material lamentation and no material desires. It's such a, when you think about it, it's such a valuable state of mind to be able to be in that, in any circumstance, to be able to keep your equipoise, to be plugged in to remembering Krishna, the ocean of mercy, the ocean of pleasure. Shubhashabha parityagi, giving up auspicious and inauspicious things, renouncing. In other words, being indifferent to material auspiciousness in that. Bhaktiman yasame priyaha. So this is, and we had that example with Prabhupada. In every state, there was a certain calm, oceanic, quality to his consciousness. All right, 18 and 19. Samakshatraucha mitrecha tatamana pamanayo shitosna sukadukeshu samaksanga vivarjitaha tullinendastutir mauni santushto yena kenachit aniketas tirumatir bhaktiman me priyonaraha. One who is equal to friends and enemies, who is equipoised in honor and dishonor, heat and cold, happiness and distress, fame and infamy, who is always free from contaminating association, always silent and satisfied with anything, who doesn't care for any residence, who is fixed in knowledge, and who is engaged in devotional service. Such a person is very dear to me. Yeah. And, okay. Purport. A devotee is always free from all bad association. Okay. Sometimes one is praised, sometimes one is defamed. That is the nature of human society. But a devotee is always transcendental to artificial fame and infamy, distress or happiness. He is very patient. He does not speak of anything but the topics about Krishna. Therefore he is called silent. Yeah. Silent does not mean that one should not speak. Silent means one should not speak nonsense. One should speak only of essentials, and the most essential speech for the devotee is to speak for the sake of the Supreme Lord. A devotee is happy in all conditions. Sometimes he may get very palatable foodstuffs, sometimes not, but he is satisfied. Nor does he care for any residential facility. He may sometimes live underneath a tree, and he may sometimes live in a very palatial building. He is attracted to neither. He is called fixed because he is fixed in his determination and knowledge. We may find some repetition in the descriptions of the qualifications of a devotee, but this is just to emphasize the fact that the devotee must acquire all these qualifications. Without good qualifications, one cannot be a pure devotee. Hadava bhaktasya kuto mahadguna. One who is not a devotee has no good qualification. One who wants to be recognized as a devotee should develop the good qualifications. Of course, he does not extraneously endeavor to acquire these qualifications, but engagement in Krishna consciousness and devotional service automatically helps him develop them. Harava bhakto sukuto mahadgana. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatya kinchana. Sarvarganais tattva samasate sura. Harava bhakto sukuto mahadgana manodatena sati dhavato bahi. So in that verse, I think spoken by Prahlad, was it? Again. Yes yasti bhaktir bhagavatya kinchana. That the kinchana devotee, the one who is pure devotee, he develops all the good qualities of the demigods. Yes yasti bhagavatya kinchana. Sarva gunais tattva samasate sura. The suras are the demigods. But one who is not a devotee can have none of these good qualities because his mind is always riding that chariot. Manoratena sati dhavato bahi, in the externals of this material world. So this is another favorite verse of Srila Prabhupada's. And he makes the point here, all these different qualities, as he points out, they can't artificially be developed, clearly, But they're kind of markers. If one can feel oneself developing them, if you're actually developing them, you can say, oh, okay, that's showing that there's some advancement there. Like just as Prabhupada would say, they say, well, how do I know if I'm making advancement? Well, Prabhupada said one of the main markers is you're developing a distaste for material sense gratification, especially the sense gratification that you used to be into. You find that it's now distasteful. Like the Yamunacharya, his famous verse. Yadavari mama cheta Krishna padāravinde. Ever since I've been enjoying this rasa of serving the lotus feet of Krishna, and then I remember all my sense gratifications, with women, and I just spit at the thought. It's not even attractive to me anymore, because he became a king. I was reading that Life of Ramanujacharya describes how Yamunacharya, he was a young boy, and he had he accepted a challenge for a debate. That's what it was, with some proud scholar, and he went and they were just shocked. He was some kind of, he was just a kid, and so the king was impressed. He said, "I promise you, if you conquer my court pundit, that I'll give you half my kingdom. You know? So there's this young boy, he's 15 years old or something. And he asked these three trick questions, which I can't recall exactly how it went. But he defeated that pundit. And so suddenly he's a young kid and he has this kingdom. And so he gets into it. You know, he was like, and he gets into it and he kind of loses his spiritual bearings there for a while, for years. And that's why he writes that verse eventually. You know, because he had all this experience as a king, you know, enjoying like anything. But then he came out of it. I'm sorry, I forget exactly how, but he became Yamunacharya, who was, the great spiritually advanced, and wrote the Stotra Ratna, you know, which Prabhupada loved, wonderful book of prayers. And so he had experienced, you know, material sense gratification to a very high degree. But he revealed his mind here. Well, now that I've given all that up, come back to my senses, and I'm experiencing the rasa of serving Krishna's lotus feet, I can really spit at all that, and I'm glad to give it up. Okay, so we're going to, let's see, where is this coming from? Okay, here's an unknown person, because the number I don't recognize. You're explaining everything so nicely, Prabhu. There's no need for questions. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. And we'll resume on the last verse of this chapter, text 20, on Monday. Thank you both for sitting in.